My name is Davion Fleming. I am the Director of Admissions here, or rather just at Lick-Wilmerding High School. I'm at home right now. And welcome just to being here at our Building a Community of Support at Lick-Wilmerding High School. You know, this fall, as we've been doing open houses and having shadow visits, you know, one of the things that folks ask a lot about is just what are the different support systems at Lick? How would you and how do you care for students at Lick, both kind of academically, socially, emotionally? What about students with different learning profiles, our neurodiverse students? How do you care for them? And so tonight we really wanted to dedicate a bit of time to share with you all the different webs of support that we've created within our community. So we're really excited to have a handful of folks here, just different representatives from our Student Support Services team, or LWHS team, here with us to walk you through our different programs, share a little bit about, again, those webs of support, and answer some questions that you all have. So yeah, again, we're really excited. I am going to share my screen. Cool. So our agenda tonight, I just did the welcome. We'll talk about advisory, our Learning Strategy Center, and then we'll round out the night talking about our counseling services at Lick. Without further ado, I would love to have our Dean team, I believe, join us to kick us off.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. My name is Raquel Olivia-Gomez, and I use she, her pronouns. I am Dean of Students, and I am happy to be here with you tonight and to share a little bit more about the Student Support Team. So one thing that our team, the Student Support Services Team, has over 100 years of centering students, partnering with families, and building a strong web of support for our community, which I think is really unique and really wonderful to have that much institutional knowledge and just love for the Lick community. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the Student Support Services team has a mission statement. And what I really love about the Student Support team is that we're able to create many teams within our group for each student case. We meet twice a rotation, which is almost twice a week, just to ensure that we have constant communication on the team and that we're working together to share information and our experience. And I think having folks from various departments on our team also offers expertise from various lenses that is also truly unique to our school. We have the student support team on statement on the screen, and that's that Lick-Wilmerding Student Support Services team, comprised of deans, equity and inclusion leaders, the Learning Strategy Center, and counselors, serves the community in two ways. The first is through immediate student support, and the LWHS team members organize, manage, and communicate with students, teachers, advisors, and families about any students referred who may be experiencing social, emotional, behavioral, or academic challenges. And then members of the team design and monitor interventions to address particular student and family needs. Next slide, please. That was one more slide back. I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Raquel. So we have two main kind of pillars in the work that we do as a student service team. The first, as Raquel mentioned, is about immediate student support and these discrete teams working to create interventions for individual students. But the other thing we do is we look at system-wide access. And in that way, we're looking at the practices and potential barriers that schools or students have that might be impacting their sense of inclusion, access, or success. So we also spend time in our meetings thinking about what are the programs that can increase student coherence in terms of the rhythm of their day or from year to year. And in doing that, we really try to address a whole picture of student success. And one thing I will say about our team that I really appreciate is that what anchors all of the work, what centers all of the work we do is really thinking about student well-being and growth, and that being growth as personal growth as well as academic growth. And so when we're thinking about student-wide access, we're really thinking about what are the systems in place to allow all students from the different experiences and pathways that they're entering into the school to have equitable access to their growth and to their learning. And so in being responsive to new challenges like COVID, there were things that we really helped to push forward in thinking about what kind of schedules are students needing and participating with other administrators around that conversation. By looking at student interventions, we're also thinking about what homework load looks like. We're thinking about what translations look like when we're thinking about our larger community. And we're also thinking about what are the policies we need to put in place. Most recently, we worked on a guide and protocols and policies for students who are transitioning so that we can support them in order to be more fully who they are in the school and make sure that the services we have are clearly accessible to them, and we're taking the weight of the work into that community-oriented space so that they can really practice the growth and we hold the other pieces of that. And so those are the two main ways that we really try to function as a system. And then there are other things. So I'll pass it to the next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. Chris here again. So I'm the 9th and 10th grade dean. Kindra and I together designed the advising program. And our program is a 4-year program in which students are selected to be in a group of about 12 kids with an advisor and stay with that same group and advisor for 4 years. And for us, our program is designed to do a few things. One is to ensure that each individual student and family is known, cared for, and supported. So that's kind of the advisor is basically like their first go-to person if they have any questions or concerns. They have someone in the school who knows them and will know them over the course of their time at Lick. The other is to provide students with a regular opportunity to learn and practice the skills needed to live and thrive in a diverse, inclusive community. Certainly, this is what we hope that Lick is, a diverse and inclusive community. We hope that the skills that we learn in advising are skills that our students will use in any and every community that they're in. So we do this through an emphasis in 4 different strands. They are community connections, which is certainly a big part of our 9th grade curriculum, and also, part of our 10th grade curriculum. Care for self, excuse me, care for self and others, academic coaching and support, and celebration and play. So couple thoughts about each of these. So community connections. We are still seeing, and I think we probably will for several more years, impacts from COVID, from the pandemic, and from students not being able to be together and be able to practice the skills of having conversations, meeting friends, making friends, awkward moments. What do I do? All those kinds of things our students don't have as much practice in. And so we really have emphasized, how do we build community? How do we build connections, genuine connections with people? How are we good active listeners? These are all things that we're really trying to focus on. Care for self and others is huge because as we're seeing, there are a lot of issues around mental health, physical health, the well-being of our students. Again, the impact of COVID has been actually, I think, very clear in terms of how it's impacting our young people. And so we really want to make sure that they know, how can they take care of themselves? How can they take care of others in their universe as well? Certainly part of it is academic coaching and support. If a student is struggling in a class, they might ask for some advice from their advisor, or if maybe They are confused about like how they get connected with a peer tutor. The advisor can help them with that. So that's also part of what happens with the advising program. And then lastly, and very importantly, celebration and play. We feel like kids don't actually play enough with each other in person. So today, actually, as Kindra was saying earlier, our juniors just had a retreat offsite at Scandia. And they were playing laser tag and bumper boats and games. And really, some of them were sitting down and just playing card games and crocheting. But to give them that break at a time when they're feeling a whole lot of stress, I think is important. And we really want to center that as well. Okay, next slide, I think. Okay, we have that as well. Okay, so we've talked about this a little bit, but in terms of the theme for this year, it's cultivate, right? So I kind of alluded to that earlier. And also, we really want students to be thinking about, what am I doing to contribute to a community that is inclusive and supportive of all its members? So we really want students to take personal responsibility for how they treat others in the community, how they're welcoming people into spaces, how they're being inclusive of them, and being really mindful of that. And we really start that actually from day one. From the first day of Frosh orientation, I talked to them about the importance of and the power of being able to actually have positive interactions with people every day that actually build community, and interactions that might actually break down community, that they actually have a choice in how they do that. And so we really are trying to have them focus on, what does it mean to build something up together? Next slide. All right, and here we are at Q&A.
Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So that we can have this Q&A. And so I really love and have been enamored with the idea of cultivate. And one of the things that it alludes to is cultivating community. And so can you talk a little bit about how advising is a space where culture at Lick is cultivated, right? And so we always talk about how our community is really kind and really supportive. In what ways does advising become a centerpiece to help cultivate the community that we want to see?
I can address that first, Davion. Thanks for that question. So one of the things that we do is we really try to build connection through stories, right? And through personal stories. So we have curriculum during the school, different times of the school year, where we ask each of the students to share something about themselves. So for example, most recently, we asked students to share something about some member of their family. It could be an ancestor, it could be someone who's in their immediate family, just to share a little story about why that person is special to them, or maybe about a journey that they had, or something about them, and to also bring in a photo. And it was really lovely to hear about how the students responded to each other and to that time together. I think they're really interested in getting to know each other. We have people, families at the school who have really engaging and interesting and very varied stories. That's part of what I think makes our community such a rich community, because we have this wealth of knowledge and experience that we can share with each other. So in that way, I feel like advising is the perfect space to start having those conversations, and then to build on them in classrooms, in the hallways, et cetera. But we like to start it off in advising.
May I add to that, Davion? I also think that as Chris mentioned, it's also the structural way we hold advisory, that there is a regular touch point, that advisory is part of the flow of their week. And so it's something that becomes a rhythm of, I'm going to touch base with this person, I'm going to be in a space that is not about academics, but it is about community, it is about culture, and it is about growth. And it holds that space for, I'm part of a community that is growing, not only in how I'm doing my learning for school, but how I'm doing my learning as a person, and how I'm understanding myself in relationship to others. And so I think that having an advisor as a mentor that is not necessarily a classroom teacher also just provides an important opportunity for students to be in relationship with adults, and practice those skills, in terms of what it means, again, to do the community building and the cultivation. So I think it's the structures that we have in place, as well as the opportunities to actually do those adult relationships, and the curriculum supports that, and it is differentiated in a way that what the 9th graders need might not be the same as the 12th graders. And so it's also that we're trying to be aware of, as the students move through their journey, what do they need at any given point in time, in order to develop those skills or in order to deepen those skills. So.
Right.
Can I just add to that? I think that all of that is right on with advising. And as a new person who has gotten to get into some advising classes, I really appreciate the size of advisory, the smaller ratio, especially for the frosh coming in. They might not have a lot of folks that they know already. And so having that small space with that touch point with just maybe 6 or 8 other classmates, I think they build a quicker sense of belonging. They get to share more about themselves, which might not be something that they do a lot in other classes. So I think that that also really helps with just showing, that the community cares about them as individuals, and wants to walk with them along, alongside them throughout their journey here. So I think that that's really important and really lovely.
That's awesome. Raquel and Kindra, you alluded a little bit to just kind of the nuts and bolts of advising. And so it would be great if you could share with folks just how many folks are typically in an advisory. How many advisors do you have? Do you keep the same advisor for over your span at Lick, or do you change every year?
I'll start with this one and then we can again wrap around. So our advisory program is 4 years, and the way it's set up is that when you enter into advisory as a freshman, you travel with that group and that adult the whole way through. And again, that goes into that idea of deepening relationships, that person knows you as you're coming in and is able to hold you through your growth and know you in your growth process, to be able to support you when you're struggling, or to be able to acknowledge when you're shining and knowing the different journey points that you've been along. So it's a 4-year advising program that you stay with throughout the time. And currently we have approximately 48 advisories across the 4 grades. So there's about 12 advisories per grade, and the numbers of those, the population of the advisory varies based on class size, but is anywhere from 8 to 12 regularly. And so that's kind of the structures and the way that we again try to play with that kind of individual space. And then as Chris said, with the curriculum, we also play with opportunities to engage with each other. And so while you do have this home base, there are also times that we put you in relationship with other groups, rather that's a fun competition or rather that's kind of a learning or processing place. So while you're in this discrete space, you also have the opportunity to reach into other parts of the community.
Excellent. Thanks, Kindra. What about how are advisories created? I can add a little bit to that, but maybe Chris or Raquel, you want to talk a bit about that? Or I can do it, doesn't matter.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold. Well, I'm getting over a cold. That's me being like optimistic. Okay, so actually Davion and I work on it. Really, Davion and his team in admissions know the kids, so that's kind of that's super helpful in the process. In general, we are looking to have some balance in things. So it's generally random, but there also is some intentionality in it. So for example, we try to have the same number of male identifying and female identifying students in a group. So it's not like tilted one way or the other. We also pay attention to non-binary students to make sure that maybe they're not the only one in a group. We might look at geography only in that we don't want to have only one student from the South Bay. We want to make sure we have at least 2 in the same group. So there are some things like that we look at, but other than that, we really want to try to mix those advising groups up, because honestly, like, part of what's so great about advising is that students are hanging out with kids they wouldn't necessarily have chosen to hang out with based on particular identifiers, right? Like, they're not necessarily on the same soccer team, but they're together in advising. They get a chance to actually get to know other kids, right? Part of what we're trying to do at Lick is give students as many opportunities as possible to meet different kids and to build different relationships, right? So advising allows us to do that. So that's a little bit about how we put those groups together.
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add to that is the admissions team works really closely with Chris and Kindra and Raquel, and thinking about what are the different strengths of our advisors, and thinking about, what are some of the specific needs of our incoming students. I always have the great privilege, as Chris mentioned, in knowing the students fairly well through their applications, and really knowing what their strengths are, what are their points of tension, what are their challenges. And so we try our best to also pair students up with advisors who would be really great support systems to help them as they navigate the different challenges, whatever they may be. And so it really is a team effort in making the advisors and try to be as intentional as we possibly can. One last question, and I think this question kind of came to my mind as I think it was something you said, Kindra, in terms of differentiation. Can you give an example of, or it can be any one of you, but can you give kind of a tangible or concrete example of something that was done in advisory that looked, pretty different for our 9th graders than it did for maybe our 11th or 12th graders?
Let me take this one, Chris. Okay, excellent. So as Chris gave the example of the storytelling, so in freshman year, the students have been working on getting to know each other. And what that means is getting to know each other in a deep way. That means getting to know family, getting to know stories, getting to know histories. And so now that they're starting to do that, we move into other places in their 10th grade. And so then it's knowing who are people that are inspiring them, how are they kind of building that relationship. And so we move from kind of who are you in relationship to your family, who are you in relationship to your community. And then in the 11th grade right now, actually, I've been working with the students on who are you in relationship to yourself? How do you know what's coming up for you? As you may know, junior year is often conceived as a very challenging year because it begins a college admissions kind of conversation. And so students walk into that year carrying a lot of baggage. And one of the things that we try to do with advisory is say, okay, how do you recognize that? How do you recognize your feelings in that situation? How do you hold that in your body? And then how do you give yourself an opportunity to set that down or figure out what your needs are so that you can try to address that and move forward, really focusing on the present and being with your learning right now, knowing that things will happen. So there's this way of building these storytelling and building an insight within the different communities that you're part of. But really, as you're moving into that kind of adult framework brain, which is still very much in development, it's also getting to know, okay, so who is it that I need to be in relationship to all of these different communities and these different stories? And then how, in acknowledging those feelings, those identities, do I start to also navigate what my needs are and how I can get those met? And part of that comes from knowing where I've come from and knowing where other people have come from. Because again, while there is an individual journey, part of advisory is that you're not there alone, that you are there in connection, right? There is a way that you have been woven together and you hold each other. And so by junior year, ideally, and into senior year, you've created this safety net with this community where we want it to be everywhere. You walk into classrooms and spaces and feel vulnerable and authentic, most definitely. But advisory is a place where you're learning those skills and really have a a grounding, right? A home base where you can really do that. And so we differentiate in that we're building these skills and then thinking about where are they in their journey of high school, and their journey beyond high school. And then how do we give them tools to work in that moment?
So Davion, I clicked on this thing to say that I would answer something live. Should I just answer for like 10 seconds? I'm so sorry.
Go ahead. Just let the folks know.
I don't know how to undo it.
You're good. You're fine.
Okay. So someone asked about food allergies and food allergy awareness. And so the quick answer is certainly we are very aware of food allergies, and our food service program does its very best to address those needs. So for example, we have students who are allergic to dairy or wheat or nuts, things like that. So we try our best to label things, to have options available to students who have different allergies. We have some kids who are allergic to just about everything, and there are things for them to eat. It might get boring what they're eating, but we have been able to accommodate all of our students with allergies. So it is something that we work really hard at, and I'm sure we're not perfect, but it's certainly something that we do focus on at Lick.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dean team. I appreciate you all, and thanks for being here. I'm sorry, folks, that we can't get to all of the questions. It's really hard to, but just a couple that I can answer super quickly before we transition over to the Learning Strategy Center. Here and there, we have students enter Lick into the 10th or 11th grade, and so similar in terms of the process that we have for our 9th grade students. We take a look at, the students' strengths, that maybe their challenges, their personality, and try to find the best advisory for them. And we give the advisor a heads up, let them know that they'll have a new member, so that the advisor can reach out, so that either Chris or Kindra, depending on the grade, can reach out to them and make sure that they get all settled as well. So that was just one that I really wanted to touch on before we transitioned over. And so I am going to share my screen again, and we will talk about the Learning Strategy Center.
Hi, folks. This is Winifred back on your screen. So the Learning Strategy Center, we really think that it is a vital center of student support at Lick-Wilmerding. We do have a primary purpose. We have 2 learning specialists on staff, but our primary purpose is to support our neurodiverse learners, students who have been diagnosed with conditions like ADHD or learning differences or OCD, something that impacts their ability to perform academically on some level. And we do a pretty deep dive into the documentation of their diagnosed condition and kind of translate that into English, because our primary goal is to help these students understand how they learn and what their strengths are, so that they can overcome their weaknesses by using their strengths. I often tell students that their weaknesses are speed bumps that we're going to get them over with accommodations, but their strengths are how they're going to solve problems all their lives. So it's really more important to know what your strengths are than your weaknesses. But we have a 4-year scaffolded program to help kids develop greater and greater self-awareness and autonomy, so that when we send them off to college, we know for sure that they know how to appropriately advocate for themselves, and they will be models of metacognitive awareness. Next slide, please. We also work with neurotypical students quite a bit, and the LSC hosts some services that serve the entire community, depending on what people's needs are. So that includes the peer tutoring program, which is run by students, for students, is run out of our office. And we present different kinds of workshops on how to study more efficiently. And Owen often goes into some of the Frosh body-mind education classes and teaches workshops on time management, whatever the case may be. We will provide services to the entire community to support those needs. Next screen, please. So what kind of person would thrive at Lick-Wilmerding? We have a pretty significant population of neurodiverse learners. I think it ranges between 12 and 15% of our population on a regular basis. And the students who succeed the most are people who know how to do work and they know how to hand that work in. A student who misses handing in homework will often struggle. It's not that they can't be successful, it's that they're probably going to struggle because particularly in the 9th grade, homework is perceived as a way for students to have some agency over their grade. You can't always control how you're going to do on a test, but you can always control how you're doing on your homework. So, and teachers are very aware of the need for scaffolding that because we take students from so many different kinds of educational backgrounds. So there's a ramping up and a structuring to show students what they need and how to get it in. But then there's quite a bit of homework involved. Another factor that makes it really important for students is, are they passionate about being at Lick? Do they want Lick more than anything? Because a student who really wants to be here will make some sacrifices to be successful here. And sometimes that is necessary. It's kind of a truism at Lick-Wilmerding that you can do anything you want to do, but you can't do everything you want to do. So sometimes a student who is perhaps a multi-sport athlete might have to give up one of those seasons in order to address the work that they have. And we work with them to help them figure out how to navigate that kind of issue. Another factor that makes it likely that a student will be successful is if they are capable of building trusting relationships with adults, and through those trusting relationships will accept feedback, because we are here to guide students towards becoming their best selves. We try to tease out of each student, who do you want to be in the world? And then we really try to guide them towards that adult version of themselves. And sometimes that means giving difficult feedback. And we do it with gentleness, but we do feel like it's part of our responsibility to tell people what they need to hear in order to become the people they want to be. Next slide. All right, so it's often a question that comes to me and to Davion and his team as well. Should we diagnose neurodiversity during the application process? And I feel very strongly that yes, absolutely, parents should disclose about the neurodiversity that their students encounter. We do not discriminate against neurodiverse learners. We don't have a cap on how many students we accept. But we know really well that this is not, we love Lick-Wilmerding, it's an amazing school, but it's not the right school for every single person. And so if we don't provide the kind of resources that your student needs, you need to know that in advance. You need to know if this is going to be the kind of fit that will work for your child. For a neurotypical person, at least in my perspective, they can be successful just about anywhere. But for a neurodiverse learner, a vulnerable student, the fit of the high school is really crucial. And it's much to your kid's advantage to figure that out before you make a decision on high schools. And we can help with that process. Also, sometimes we have seen that parents will wait until their kid is really floundering academically before they say, oh, I forgot to mention that my kid's got a learning difference. And that does not serve a student. The process that we have of onboarding our students begins the summer before 9th grade. It's a pretty labor-intensive process. And because we're really trying to meet the kids' needs on an individual basis. And so if the kid doesn't have that sort of like lead up to freshman year, they're actually starting at a disadvantage. In addition, families do get diagnosed over the course of their 4 years, but we can only process them in the order in which they come to us. And so if families wait quite a while to disclose their kids' neurodiversity, then they are potentially at the end of the list of people that we're working with. Okay, next screen. Next screen. Okay. Our overarching purpose is that we think ahead. We're thinking about a kid's whole lifetime. If we know that metacognitive awareness, understanding how you learn and thinking about how you learn, is the single best predictor of success in school and in life. And so we really try to inculcate that in our students. And there's much more information that you could find out about how we could support you, particularly on the website, which I think is on the next slide. Next slide, please. Oh, I didn't have it there. If you go to the Lick-Wilmerding website and you go to the curriculum tab, Underneath that, there is a link to the Learning Strategies Center pages, and we have a fairly exhaustive list of resources there and a really clear explanation of how our programs work. Okay, so bring on some
Awesome.
questions.
Yes. You know what we can do, Winifred, in the interim, so that folks don't have to like search too far for it. Elizabeth has actually just put the link to the LSC section of our website in the chat for folks. And so yeah, so if you go there, you can learn a ton more. It's really, really, really good stuff there. And if you have more questions specific to your child, please reach out to me. My email is dfleming@lwhs.org. Fairly easy to find. And we will be more than happy to, I'll be more than happy to speak with you, find a time to talk. But, you know, one of the questions that I get regularly, Winifred, is, is the LSC just for our neurodiverse students? And so in what ways do, you know, maybe our neurotypical students or students that have different types of challenges engage with your office and with your team?
Pay no attention to the cat behind the curtain.
All good.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Davion. In addition to having programs like peer tutoring and what have you, we work with a lot of neurotypical students one-on-one, and because every single student can benefit from understanding themselves metacognitively. So students will come and say, I'm not getting the kind of grades I want on my tests. What can I do differently? And I and Owen both have like what I think of as a vast invisible toolbox full of strategies that students can say, well, this might work here and this might work here. And so we will work with students on an individual basis to help them figure out what can they do differently to be more successful. And honestly, since COVID, a lot of students are coming to us not really understanding how to study. And so we've been doing a lot of work teaching students, this is what studying actually means. This is what it means to identify the things that you don't know and fill those gaps. So we do that, and we will work with anybody who, I mean, assuming we have time, of course, we'll work with anybody who feels like they want to understand how to be more successful as a student.
Awesome. I think maybe it's a bit of an offshoot of that particular question, but you know, another question that I get is, is there a stigma amongst the students around being a neurodiverse learner? I think it's one thing for us in the admissions process with the adults on campus, for there not to be a lot of stigma, to treat our students with care and with love. But what have you noticed within the student population?
I actually think we do, no false modesty, I think we do a pretty freaking amazing job. Students come in based on what their experience has been like in middle school. Some kids do come in with a sense of stigma and shame around being neurodiverse. However, once they've been in our program for a little while, they realize that our students are star athletes, they're star performers, they go to the best colleges in the world. Everybody goes to the college that's best for them. They are just as good as any student in the school, and better than some. And we have this amazing crew of interns who volunteer to work with us, and their mission is to increase the awareness of neurodiversity in our community. And they put on neurodiversity fairs, and they put on activities, and they put on evenings for our neurodiverse learners, and they do a lot of stuff, and they have immense pride, thank you. Kind of late for me. They have immense pride in being neurodiverse and understanding that that is a strength and not a weakness. And they really celebrate that very, very publicly. So I think that by the time people are seniors, quite the opposite of having a stigma, there's more neurotypical students coming to us and saying, could I possibly be one of you? Okay, well, maybe, if you're cool enough.
I love it. One last question. Can you just, you alluded a bit to the onboarding for our 9th grade students.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just talk a little bit more about that? Just kind of give parents a bit more insight into what are those meetings like? What is your goal for neurodiverse learners in their first year on campus at Lick?
Yeah, sure. Again, we've got a 4-year scaffolded program that we've developed over the course of many years. If a parent is accepted to Lick-Wilmerding and accepts us, and we know that they have neurodiversity in their profile, I will ask the parent to send me the documentation. And we do require current documentation in order for a student to be eligible for accommodations. Over the course of the summer, from that documentation, I will compose a draft of the learning plan, the formal educational plan that will be put in place for that student. I will ask the family to come in and meet with me over the summer to vet that document and to gather more crucial information. There's a lot of really important stuff that doesn't even get asked in the diagnostic process, really important things. So we'll gather that information and make an initial contact. And then in the days immediately preceding the start of the school, each of those families will come in and sit down with Owen or with me and with all of that student's teachers in the room. And Owen or I will present the learning profile, which is basically a 2-page summary in English of the results of the diagnostic report, which are not in English. So we've translated that into English, and we will present that to the teachers. So from the get-go, before classes even start, the teachers know that this kid might need a little extra attention. The teachers know the parents, everybody knows who's on this student's team. The learning plan then lives in our school system behind the wall so that teachers can access that learning plan in real time. And that will talk about the student's diagnosis, their strengths, their weaknesses, and what accommodations they're eligible for. And then over the course of the freshman year, students work with us at whatever level they feel most comfortable. I have students who meet with me weekly. And I have students who sometimes check in more than once a week. And I have students who check in with me every 2 weeks or twice a quarter or once, whatever, to just like check in and see how things are going and what needs to change in order for them to be more successful. And so I am constantly modeling this process of identifying obstacles, hopefully before they become actual problems, and then designing solutions for those problems. This analytical reflection on your process and what's working and what's not working.
Awesome.
And of course, they take tests with us too.
Yeah. So much. I feel like I always learn something new when I hear you speak, and so really appreciate it. I hope that was helpful for folks as your questions were coming in. And again, if you have more questions, you want to dive a little bit deeper into your specific child.
I just happened to see one in the chat that I just want to address real quickly,
Yes.
because it's probably a common question. Do we require a current diagnosis to provide support, or is a diagnosis from 2.5 or 3 years ago? 2.5 or 3 years ago is sufficient. But if the diagnosis is from like 2019, 2018, that's so old, and the kid is at such a different developmental stage that it's not actually helpful to us.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Again, folks, if you have more questions, please let me know. Please reach out. I will schedule time to speak with you, talk about your child, and figure out next steps and figure out if Lick is a great place for your child to apply. Okay, so we will transition here to our finale of counseling. So I will share my screen. Off you pop, as they say on the Great British Bake Off.
Thank you, Davion. Hi, everyone. Once again, my name is Yuka, and I just wanted to say in Japanese, Nihongo de mo sapport dekimasu.
And hello, everyone. Once again, my name is Erika y quería darle un saludo a las familias hispanohablantes que estén con nosotros esta noche.
Okay, so next slide, please. So the counseling department, we provide support to students, parenting adults, and faculty, staff, and administration, although it looks a little different for each group. So we're going to go into describing in some detail now, starting with our students. So as the slide says, we provide a pretty full range of supports, but will never diagnose or treat a student for a specific mental health disorder. Erika and I both are trained and licensed as therapists, but we do not provide therapy at Lick. And so when we say full range of supports, if you're wondering what that means, we provide individual support with various aspects of student life, peer conflict resolution, help accessing outside services, crisis intervention and stabilization, etc. Students often tell us that they aren't sure if their problems are big enough to talk to a counselor about, but we tell them that nothing is too small if you're wanting to talk it through with someone.
And another way that we interact with students is by offering presentations on various topics that relate to adolescent life. And we often do those in grade level meetings. We either create and present ourselves, or we will host speakers. And some topics that we've covered so far this year are substance use from a harm reduction approach and consent and healthy relationships. So we did want to talk with you about some scenarios of when students come to speak to us. You can see some of these here on the slide, but some common ones are students feeling overwhelmed and having difficulty doing their work and maybe just wondering why that's so difficult for them. Sometimes students are overwhelmed by their workload and are having difficulty with time management and are not getting enough sleep. Other times students are struggling with different parts of their identity, so they might come to talk to us about aspects of their gender, sexuality, about their socioeconomic status, so any part of their identity that they would like to explore with a caring adult.
Also, sometimes students come to talk to us if they've just gone through a painful breakup and need emotional support, or if a student is concerned about their friend and wants to know how to support them. Also, we've talked to groups of students who come by asking to talk about a difficult dynamic in their friend group and what to do about it. Next slide, please.
All right, so some aspects of how we work with parents and guardians are that we're here to support you as you support your teen. And so parents and parenting adults will often reach out to us and set up a time to either talk on the phone or have a Zoom and just talk about any concerns that they have for their child and how they can best support them.
Yes, and we also offer parent and guardian evenings on topics related to adolescent development. Last fall, we had a physician who's also a parent of alums speak to parents and guardians about substance use from a harm reduction approach. And last spring, we presented to parenting adults on addressing anxiety and depression in their teenager. And this year so far, we've partnered with the Parents Association and presented on supporting the well-being of adolescents during their first general meeting of the school year.
Yes. Another way that we can support families is to help you figure out if your child or your family needs outside support, and we can help you look for a provider. So we keep a pretty up-to-date list of therapists in the Bay Area, and we can help you figure out who might be a good fit for your child. And we also serve as the primary liaison with the school if the outside provider wants to give us some pointers on how we can best support the student at school.
So some example scenarios in how we work with parenting adults. We've had parents contact us if they're concerned that their 9th grader is having difficulty transitioning to high school, or if they're concerned about changes that they're noticing in their child's mood.
Parents also reach out to let us know if they might be concerned that their child doesn't appear to be making social connections at school. And sometimes parents or parenting adults let us know if there's something going on at home that might be impacting the student on campus so that we can better support that student.
Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of working with our faculty, staff, and administration, as part of the support team for each student, we do work closely with families, administrators, teachers, and advisors in order to keep a focus on the psychological well-being of the student.
Yes, we also support teachers in their classes by doing presentations related to mental health and well-being. So, for example, we have presented on mental health awareness in the body-mind education classes for the FROSH. We did that in September, and we will be speaking to the FROSH about eating disorders in February.
We also support teachers in their, we also provide professional development training to the faculty and staff. So this year we've presented on looking at and reaching out to students of concern for advisors before the school year began. And then we also invited a guest speaker to train faculty and staff on championing sexual ethics as part of the consent programming we plan for the entire school community.
And finally, we collaborate with administrators to address any issues that come up in the school community. And we proactively advocate for systemic change in ways that can promote student well-being. So a couple of scenarios that we have for you in terms of what teachers might bring to the counseling department. For example, a teacher might be concerned that a student in their class seems really down and is often tired, and they wonder what's going on for them. They also might notice that a student seems really worried and overwhelmed about juggling school and co-curricular activities and might seem really nervous, and they'd like to know how to better support them.
Right. Or a teacher might be preparing curriculum and ask us for input on how to address sensitive topics. Or a coach might be concerned about the health of a student athlete, and so they'll come and talk to us about that. And that is counseling in a nutshell. And so next slide, we can move on to questions.
Awesome. Let me stop my screen share. Okay. Thanks for that. You know, one of the things that that I get a ton when I speak with parents and smaller groups is just what things are teens dealing with today. You know, and sometimes just how does that what might that look like for a 9th grade student versus an 11th or 12th grade student? So like, how does that evolve over time as well?
I can start to answer that question, and then you could jump in whenever you'd like. But I could say that often the transition to high school brings up pretty new challenges. And so we might see a student come in and having some emotional difficulties just because they're facing a lot of transitions in that moment. And as they get their feet under them a little bit more at school, they might have more coping tools and just different strategies to better support themselves. So I'll find that maybe students in the younger grades come in and are just, you know, wanting to know how to deal with difficult feelings that are coming up. And older students might come in with more kind of existential concerns or forward-looking concerns about how they'll do best in college, or just kind of grappling with finding meaning in their life.
Yeah, and I guess maybe to answer kind of the first piece, you know, because we also get asked often about kind of what are some common things that, you know, students, teenagers are grappling with. And I think I would say that definitely we see a lot of people struggling to manage feelings of anxiety. And that really ranges from brief moments of anxiety as they're like worrying about social dynamics, all the way to a diagnosed anxiety disorder that requires treatment. And another fairly common challenge we've seen more of recently is feelings of depression, on a continuum from occasionally feeling down to diagnosed mood disorder that's addressed through treatment. And, you know, I think it's important to speak to other aspects of a teenager's life that impacts their mental health, like navigating relationships, whether it's friends, romantic, or family, managing their time, which has been mentioned before, including schoolwork, co-curricular activities, and social media, and how well they're caring for their physical health, which includes sleep and nutrition, which are all closely connected to their mental health and well-being.
Amazing. I got a question in the Q&A, and I'm going to broaden it a little bit, but can you just touch a little bit on, you know, earlier when we started, I talked about this web of support. And so I don't think, I think at times it is harder for folks to see the connections between counseling and perhaps advising and perhaps with the Learning Strategy Center. And so can you talk a little bit about how you may partner with the deans, or you may partner with Winifred and Owen in providing a holistic support for our students?
Okay. Well, one of the first aspects is this ongoing communication that we have with our student support team. So we're meeting at least once a week at a sit-down meeting And we're often having a lot of just informal day-to-day interactions. So in that way, we're in really close touch with the dean of students, with the grade level deans. Learning strategies folks are right across the hall from us. So, you know, we might be just pretty constantly talking to one another. Teachers know that they can drop by and that we have an open door, so they can also talk to us about concerns that students have. And by sitting on the student support team, as I said, we look at systemic issues, or we think of ways that by broader programming, we can support student well-being. So we work with students one-on-one, and then we're also part of larger systems that, you know, will try to enhance their mental health while they're at Lick-Wilmerding.
Yeah, and I think definitely Erika really spoke well to like when kind of the adults in the community are concerned about a student and how we partner really closely because students have hopefully a lot of different trusted adults that they interact with on a day-to-day basis. And I think, Davion, when you asked the question, what I also thought about is like, say a student comes to us first. You know, one thing I really want to make clear is that because there's often a question about confidentiality. And so, you know, I think it's important for people to know that if a student approaches us, that, you know, they can be assured that, you know, most everything that they share with us remains private. I say most everything because there are exceptions when we have to breach confidentiality, and it's all around ensuring that the student is safe. But if a student is, you know, talking to us about something that we feel like it would really benefit, like if we were to talk with a teacher, then we will have a conversation with the student and be like, hey, you know, you're telling me this, and, you know, I wonder if you would be open to, you know, me connecting with a teacher, or, you know, maybe you want to do it yourself, but you want to kind of, you know, talk it through with me of like what you actually want to say to the teacher. So we also really want to hold that space for students of like knowing that they have the privacy and that we can be an advocate for them when they want us to, but it's definitely led by the student. So.
Last question, and I like this one because I always think it's top of mind, but helping students navigate social media, how do we have those conversations? And I think maybe what might be helpful for the audience, because I'm assuming that most of them are parents. How might parents kind of navigate those conversations at home around social media? If you have any advice for
that. That's such a huge topic. I mean, I'm
sorry.
Students or families are having these conversations, I'm sure, already in middle school, because so many students are accessing social media pretty early. So I'm hoping that you clarify kind of your values and beliefs around using social media, what level of use is appropriate, and go into high school with some sort of family contract around that, right? Just like a verbal contract. I can say that from meeting with students, you know, when they analyze their own habits, many of them find that they feel better when they don't use social media as much. So they are able to become more self-aware and reflect on the impact that using social media has on them. So I think social media is an amazing tool to build community and to explore interests. And it can also be a place where students feel kind of decreased self-esteem or feeling left out, or it just brings up challenging feelings for them. And so in meeting with students, that is a topic that comes up pretty often, just noticing how much they're using social media and what effect that's having on them, and then setting some goals if they want to make changes. Yuka?
Yeah, I think in terms of any kind of guidance that we might be able to offer to parents, and I will definitely speak as a parent myself, it's not easy. So that's the first thing. And I think what feels really helpful is kind of what Erika was mentioning, which is, you know, really speaking to the positives, why, you know, your child might be using social media, and kind of hearing from them, you know, why it's a good thing in their life. Because I think if we come in with kind of all the negatives, which, you know, we are aware that there's a lot of negative impact that social media can have, especially on mental health. But I think the way to really open the conversation is to be curious about, you know, what's working for you, Why do you like to use it? What do you get out of it? And I think a huge generational shift is that so much of relating and connecting and socializing does happen on social media now. And so I think that is an important avenue that, hopefully can stay open for your child. And, then also having the conversation about like, is there anything that you want to change about your use? And I think that if they can be in that space where they're not feeling like they have to defend themselves, then I think hopefully they can open up to like what Erika was speaking to. It's just like, yes, like actually, like, I spent way too much time, on TikTok yesterday. Or, like I do notice that like the more that I'm scrolling on Instagram, like I'm starting to feel kind of bad about myself. And so hopefully it could be just a lot of curiosity and open-ended questions that can then lead to, talking about the values and talking about, the potential pitfalls that they may encounter if they're overly reliant on social media, or if they're finding that their time is getting kind of sucked up by use of it. So.
Awesome, thanks for that. I really love the values-based approach to the use of social media. And, as I think about Lick, I hope that families also use that approach in thinking about the different places where your child may go to high school next year. Use that same values-based approach to find different schools whose values best align with yours. And as you think about your child thriving next year and beyond, I believe that they'll find their sense of belonging, they'll find their place, they will thrive because the values that we have as a school match the same ones that you have at home. So I hope that tonight was a little sneak peek into some of the things that we value at Lick. I know I didn't get to all of your questions. Unfortunately, it's impossible to do that. But again, if you have any questions, please reach out to any member of the admissions team. I'm happy to answer emails and happy to answer phone calls. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to do that. If you are coming for a visit sometime soon, I look forward to meeting you. And if you decide to follow through in the admissions process, I look forward to learning more about your child in the coming months. But have a great night. Yuka, Erika, thanks so much for being here and sharing your time with us and with our prospective families. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.